Structural wealth anomy. This is economics, the sermon. The economic quagmire of increasing poverty for the greater and growing percentage of society, accompanied by increasing wealth for the decreasing few, or so-called 1%, which is actually now 0.01% of the highest income levels, is neither new nor unique. The same problem of wealth accumulation in fewer and fewer hands can be read about in the story of the prophet Isaiah in the biblical book named after the prophet Isaiah. There's even a woeful injunction against the practice of hyper wealth accumulation, as Isaiah pronounces. Cursed are those who are joining house to house and putting field to field, till there is no more living space for any but themselves in all the land. That, of course, is from Isaiah 5, verse 8, from your basic English translation. It seems that the accumulation of wealth is in the form of land in this quoted example. This accumulation of wealth is neither a uniquely modern phenomenon nor void of producing an economic quagmire wherever it exists. The religious proscription against this practice heralded woes for all who embraced the accumulating practice. The understood woe of being displaced from the land is understood since land was a major percentage of wealth in the agrarian societies of the past and of the present. This dilemma didn't just afflict ancient Israel. It was also recorded in ancient Greece. In the experience of Solon of Athens, who was given complete authority to resolve the issue, we see the same tendency for wealth to be accumulated at the pinnacle of society's distribution, of society's abundance. In the case of ancient Athens, all wealth, including one's freedom, was taken from the lower members of society and transferred to its highest levels. The same financial mechanisms in place at the time are still an active part of the modern day economics. These financial mechanisms of transaction or transaction modes, as coined by and in the words of Karl Polanyi, were the vehicle and continue to this day to be the means by which wealth is transferred from one economic entity to another. In other words, transaction modes are several in our society. Karl Polanyi mentions 3 types, but we'll get to him later. Solon didn't fully succeed in his task, but ended up antagonizing all 4 levels of Athenian society and exiling himself from Athens after his term of office ended. However, he did bring about some measure of reform, notably freeing from slavery those who had lost their freedom through financial indebtedness. We have a modern day equivalent in death. In Israel and the Old Testament records, Their response to this was the sabbatical, in which all debt was forgiven. This is being discussed these days, and in fact, in some quarters, that's happening. In considering all the great empires of the past, it becomes evident that they flourished and then floundered not on their failures, save the failure to deal with equality with their economic success, to deal equitably, with their economic success. Greed and ignorance undermine the success of equitably distributing the total wealth produced. Societies then and now were unable to share inclusively and equitably the abundance of the entire productivity of society. Prior to the reduction and final disintegration of the British Empire, John Maynard Keynes suggested that the inequitable distribution of wealth was one of the threats in need of a solution. The other was the unacceptable levels of unemployment. A solution was not forthcoming, despite Keynes's best attempts at struggling theoretically to offer alternate solutions to the problems he saw threatening the society in which he lived. The British Empire, in which Keynes was a lord and into which I was born and lived for a month and a week, is no longer. Its shadow remains in the commonwealth of loosely aligned nations. This dilemma, the inability to share equitably the wealth of national productivity, faces us today and seeks a solution even as the same processes of degeneration presses on and is manifest in challenges to the steady march of wealth accumulation by fewer and fewer of society's members in all modern societies. The rich are reluctant to give up their wealth, and the poor are powerless to bring about the same fairer redistribution that the Athenian poor sought from so long. In part, a solution would require an economic paradigm, in part, a solution would require an economic paradigm that would be fair and objective and measurable, none of which can be seen in the present market-defined economy that has accumulation of wealth into fewer and fewer hands, leaving a vacuum of well-being at all but the highest financial strata. The market system is not intended to deal with poverty. It is about the exchange of economic goods and services and entitlements and prerogatives, and the maintenance of both the traffic and the roadway, aka the market, with profit making and profit accumulation to produce more capital. For these reasons and more, a new paradigm is needed to manage the well-being of the economy. The elements of such an economy have always been present in human society and have even been referenced by economic thinkers, but not embraced by those who have accumulated wealth in the forms of political power and the non-pecuniary wealth of society that is also susceptible to the same process of accumulation drift. Not least of these is the wealth of intellectual power that has primarily been pooled in academia that society has depended on for solutions to the problems that threaten society. The problems relating to the economy and specifically poverty have as yet to be solved by academia. Ironically, due to intellectual poverty, impotent ideas that are closely guarded by those with vested interest in the chairs and positions from which the accumulation of unworkable ideas have been used and reused in an endless process of modification and reiteration. The ancient Mosaic institution of the Jubilee, which occurred every 50 years, was a counterbalance to what can be called accumulation drift, whereby wealth is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Another legal institution that had the intention of minimizing or at least slowing down the process was the law of gleaning. So important were these laws that they were reiterated in both the books of the law to be found in the Bible. The two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, had their own versions of the law. In Leviticus 23:22, we have the law stated, when you reap the harvest of your land, moreover, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, or gather the gleaning of your harvest. You are to leave them for the needy and the alien. I am the Lord your God. And similarly, in Leviticus 19:9 and 10, we have, now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, or shall you glean your vineyard, or shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Note, this is being done on the highest authority in a theocracy, where the spoken word was the official currency. The reiteration of the law is found in Deuteronomy 24:19 and 20, and is as follows. When you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the, the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. At first blush, this may seem to be the utterings of feeble-minded goody-goodies, but is, in fact, economic policy of the highest order and efficiency. I would even argue that the value of the application of these laws, let alone expanding their use, had been whittled away through the ages without being consciously reinstated. Unconsciously and unintentionally, and mostly by accident, such restructuring of a faltering structure of an economy or subsector of an economy has taken place. What is needed is more intentionality combined with structural goals and structural targeting using structural policy that is not a part of any market approach, even as it utilizes the market along with a number of other transaction forms and modes. Such accumulation drift is a naturally occurring result of any inequitable distribution of wealth, that is capital, in its stock or flow income forms. Although such redistributive laws as the Biblical Jubilee and even the North American indigenous potlatch, condemned and outlawed, have been used as a recompense for the poor. They are, in fact, a means of preserving society from the inevitable disintegration of society that accompanies the alienation of the lower strata that is caught in an accumulation drift of negative wealth or poverty or slavery for the poor, an accumulation drift of positive wealth accruing to the already wealthy. The rich are getting richer on two counts. First, increasing income levels, and second, increasing mounds of unspent income, some of which is loaned out and much of which is diverted to pools of unused capital. This is one of the manifestations of a widening of the distribution base of the economy's income and capital. How best to counter this is directly related to managing the distribution of these factors. In other words, the structure of the economy is the foundation for its well-being, and the distribution of the stock and flow of wealth, along with the institutions that maintain these, needs to be addressed and properly managed if disaster is to be avoided and overall prosperity broadened and maintained. Similar structures can be seen in intellectual, spiritual, truth and integrity, legal, military, and wealth of heredity, language, and culture. All spheres contributed to both a subsector and an aggregated structure of total wealth. Since there are a variety of forms that contribute to the aggregated wealth, policies dealing with this superstructure of the economy need to be addressed in each select forum in order to maintain their several contributions to, and I quote, as Keynes mentioned, the economy as a whole. These forums can inform and influence all the other forums by means of transaction modes, a concept borrowed from Karl Polanyi and expanded on for purposes of understanding the dynamics of the economy and developing policy initiatives to manage and shape the superstructure of the economy, as well as the individual component parts or substructures of the superstructure. And what exactly was the woe that was to be set upon transgressors of these laws of sharing? A reiteration of the 10 deadly plagues levied upon the intractable Egyptians to persuade them to allow the Hebrews to exit Egypt. These plagues listed in Exodus included water into blood, frogs, lice, mixture of wild animals, diseased livestock, boils, storms with hail and fire, locusts, darkness for 3 days, and finally the death of the firstborn. No, the normal woes then, at the time of ancient Egypt of the pharaohs, as now are the structurally destabilizing and disintegrating results of such behavior brought upon ourselves by ourselves. Structural disintegration of the economy and the society which it supports. That is the woe we are faced with today. The penalty is self-imposed and self-administered on all the members of society. After the gripping political, cultural, economic, spiritual, ethical wilting of society, anomie settles in. Society becomes fragmented. It may be a slow process or a fast process, but without the proper intervention, it is a lethal process. It is the Humpty Dumpty scenario, lived over and over again in place after place. Consider the many magnificent ancient monuments the world wide. They are left by civilizations that grew to great heights, wealth, and left some of that wealth in the form of architectural amazement to remind subsequent peoples that the gaining of wealth in concentrated form by a minority of a society is the easy part. That is the natural process that the slightest inequalities eventually produce. The hard part is balancing wealth so that it doesn't topple society. To date, not only has this not been done, but the extant economic paradigms show no promise of being capable of doing so. But it is possible. Anomie is a notion introduced by the sociologist Max Weber as a situation in which there is no legitimate means by which to attain a stated goal. This condition can set into an economy's structure and establish an insurmountable barrier against the stability of prices, interest rates conducive to growth, and wealth distribution that is equitable. The necessary countermeasures have unfortunately on many occasions been problems in themselves, as seen in such trade-offs as unemployment for an antidote to inflation as captured in Phillips' curve trade-offs. This is, in fact, a misnomer in that the structure put forth as a linear curve is in closer examination due to the various weights of each unit of unemployment along the distribution of income and income recipients represents a potential area, not a line, within which the level of unemployment needed to be induced to reduce inflation is calculated by the aggregation of incomes of the spread of unemployed units along the distribution. The present day use of interest rates to cool the economy by putting loans out of the reach of many would be borrowers is a similar damaging fiscal tool. Again, it is due to the structural distribution of incomes and investment opportunities. Needed is a clearer understanding of ambient interest rates and how they facilitate or hinder the use of money in the economy by interacting with market interest rates, which are set by central banks or similar centralized institutions. Ambient rates that exceed market rates will provide inducements to borrow, while those that are lower than market rates will dissuade borrow. And it is necessary to be aware that differing areas and or sectors of an economy will have differing ambient rates, even when faced with the same market rates. In international and intranational and intra-confederation and union, the market and ambient rates will have complicated and intricate dialectic or multi-electric, assuming that's a thing, set of interactions. This is just a practice, just setting up to get used to using the teleprompter, which still has a few glitches, and eventually learning how to edit this and having it up on Facebook. And I think that's where it's going. I think I have actually got a YouTube channel that'll be posting these um, chats on. So I hope you join me and hopefully this new economic paradigm, Holonic structural economics or structural Holonic economics, will be a source of solutions in the future of all economies, not just capitalist. Capitalist economies work, but They have to be managed like anything else. Thank you. May the Lord bless and keep us all. Amen. Ta-da!